October 4th, 2025, 4:31 a.m. The Russian Navy's $184 million missile carrier warship had anchored in the calm waters of Lake Onega on the Caspian Sea route. This was the center of the vital 227-kilometer White Sea-Baltic Canal that connected Russian fleets to the Baltic Sea via St. Petersburg. This 950-ton Russian warship considered this the safest port. The ship's sirens began to wail. Russian sailors tried to understand what was happening. This was not a technical malfunction. It was an attack. The first shock report transmitted by the officers on the bridge to the Northern Fleet Command Center in St. Petersburg over the radio was filled with disbelief and panic.
На нас напали! Повторяю, на нас напали на Онежском озере.
Just half an hour earlier. At 3 a.m., the captain of the Russian warship was resting in his cabin. He had not a shred of concern. This was the Republic of Karelia, 1,000 kilometers away from the front line, right on the Finnish border, St. Petersburg's backyard, one of Russia's safest inland waters, where Ukrainian missiles and drones could never reach. No danger had been reported for the captain of the warship. Everything appeared normal at the center of the 227-kilometer White Sea-Baltic Canal. At the Canal Traffic Control Center in Petrozavodsk, on the shore of the lake, the operator on duty was performing routine tasks. On the screen in front of him, he was adjusting the timing of the locks and water level protocols for the passage of a scheduled nuclear submarine convoy from the White Sea. At that moment, his only concern was that his hot coffee wouldn't get cold. The Grad was a deadly hunter, carrying 8-caliber cruise missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The warship had a defense mechanism against all kinds of threats. Since the captain had been diverted from the Black Sea to this safe harbor due to the growing Ukrainian threat, he had lowered the readiness level of the ship's defense systems. Most of the crew were on leave, and the ship's powerful AK-630 MCIWS close-in weapon systems were in standby mode. The captain thought he was in the safest harbor. He was wrong. Because Lake Onega was the most critical junction of the 227-kilometer canal, the widest and slowest point to pass through, and therefore the most vulnerable point, and Ukraine had aimed its blade with surgical precision at precisely this point. It all began with a Ukrainian Buyan-M land-based signal intelligence SIGINT complex deployed in a secret location near the front line. These mobile listening stations had been scanning Russia's encrypted military communications deep within its territory for months. A few days ago, weak signals began to be picked up from an unexpected location, Russia's northwest, on a high-level command frequency normally belonging to the Black Sea Fleet and expected to be used only there. The strength and direction of the signals indicated that the source was somewhere on the waterway between St. Petersburg and the White Sea. This was an anomaly. What was a command element belonging to the Black Sea Fleet doing near the Finnish border? Following this information, Ukraine's own satellite image analysis unit was activated. Images from commercial SAR satellites began scanning ship traffic on the White Sea-Baltic Canal. However, all military vessels less than 50 meters wide, including Russia's nuclear-powered submarines belonging to the Northern Fleet, used this inland waterway as a ghost passage to completely avoid the dangerous waters controlled by NATO, which were covered by Norway and the UK's radar and sonar networks. However, the Russian warship had become entangled in another network here. Finally, a target matching the silhouette of a Buyan-M class corvette was detected in the vast waters of Lake Onega. The ship was anchored in the middle of the lake, far from civilian shipping traffic. The location of the target was now known. The final and most critical confirmation came from an inside ghost cell operating within Russia, affiliated with the main intelligence directorate GUR of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. The cell confirmed that the ship's name was Grad and that it had been taken from the Black Sea and hidden in this safe harbor due to the growing Ukrainian threat. The warship's captain believed they were safe here. This was a golden opportunity for Ukraine, resulting from deadly arrogance in the Russian chain of command. A conventional attack on this target was impossible. The area was within range of the S-400 umbrella protecting St. Petersburg and was defended by local Pantsir batteries. Therefore, the plan relied not on brute force, but on deception and precision. For this mission, the only suitable weapon in Ukraine's inventory was selected, the Lyuty. With an operational range of approximately 1,200 kilometers, this platform could carry a 75-kilogram high-explosive warhead to its target. However, what made it truly lethal was its 3-layer guidance system, designed to overcome Russian air defenses. The primary guidance system was the Inertial Navigation System, INS, which found its route without the need for GPS, using built-in gyroscopes and preloaded digital terrain maps, TERPROM. The second layer was a multi-band GNSS receiver, resistant to Russia's intense GPS jamming efforts. The final and most critical layer was the electro-optical/infrared seeker head, which activated in the terminal phase. The operation's success depended on Lyuty reaching its target. To achieve this, Russian attention had to be diverted elsewhere. This is where the trap part of the plan came into play. Lyuty would be escorted by two Banshee LR electronic warfare drones, specially modified for this mission and equipped with the same long-range airframe as Lyuty. Their mission was to fly in front of and alongside Lyuty, detect Russian air defense radars, and create blind corridors lasting seconds for Lyuty's passage by applying focused, spot jamming against them. The trap was simple. The Banshees would fly at a slightly higher altitude than the Lyuty and with a more obvious flight profile, drawing all the attention of the local air defense onto themselves. They were decoys to distract the hunter. The operation began with Lyuty and two Banshee LRs taking off from a secret base in northern Ukraine. They flew for hours toward their target, using corridors over Russia's sparsely populated northern regions that had been identified beforehand as having the weakest air defense radars. Approximately 3 hours into the flight, a Russian Nebo-M radar over Tver Oblast picked up a momentary signal. However, one of the Banshee LRs instantly detected the radar's frequency and, with a focused jamming signal, turned the faint trace on the radar operator's screen into a meaningless snowstorm. The signal did not reappear. Approximately 100 kilometers from the target, a Pantsir S-1 battery responsible for defending Lake Onega detected and locked on to two Banshees approaching at low altitude. This was the most critical moment of the operation. While the Pantsir commander was focused on the two obvious threats ahead, Lyuty, flying several kilometers behind them and much lower, was slipping through undetected from the radar's lower lobe. Russian officers did not believe for a moment that the ship on Lake Onega could be a target. For this reason, the Russian air defense network raised the alert level around the St. Petersburg port and refinery. However, seconds later, at 4:30, Lyuty was over Lake Onega. The EO/IR seeker head activated. It began scanning the calm surface of the lake. A few seconds later, it found a target matching the thermal and visual signature stored in its memory. The Grad corvette, anchored, its engines cooled but still emitting a distinct heat signature. The target recognition software confirmed. The Lyuty began its terminal dive. The sound of its piston engine echoing like a chainsaw in the silence of the night, it dove straight toward the power unit compartment, one of the ship's weakest points. The 75-kilogram warhead pierced the ship's thin armor like paper and exploded right in the middle of the compartment housing the engines and generators. The initial explosion was followed by much larger secondary explosions caused by the ship's own fuel tanks igniting. Russia's safe harbor was engulfed in flames. This attack was not simply a military operation, nor was it merely a single ship catching fire in cold waters. It was the moment when Russia's centuries-old belief in strategic depth, a concept ingrained in its imperial DNA, the fantasy of always keeping the enemy far from its own territory, in the geography of others, was buried. The fact that such a high-profile, symbolic target could be targeted and destroyed in a lake in the heart of Russia, thousands of kilometers away from the Black Sea, the main theater of war, in a refuge presumed to be the safest, was the first and clearest evidence of the total panic behind the Kremlin's closed doors. With this single, daring, and almost impossible attack, Ukraine not only brought the war to the very heart of Russia, to its most protected arteries, it also turned the Russian Navy's most secure shelter into a death trap engulfed in flames, leaving Putin with an unsolvable equation on his desk. To grasp the tectonic magnitude of this strategic earthquake, we must first set the stage correctly. The Lake Onega you see on the map is no ordinary body of water. It is the aorta of Russia's northern military architecture, the heart of a river made of steel and secrets. It is the very center of the vital White Sea-Baltic Canal, which connects Russia's port of Murmansk to the Baltic Sea via St. Petersburg. This complex canal system you see on the screen, built in the 20th century on the blood, sweat, and frozen bodies of tens of thousands of Gulag prisoners, is a 227-kilometer marvel of engineering and a human tragedy, linking the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean to St. Petersburg's imperial facade. Open-source maritime data and leaked Russian naval documents confirm that this canal serves as a dual-purpose strategic superhighway for Moscow. On the one hand, timber, nickel, and other commercial goods are marketed to the world using this waterway, while on the other hand, much more deadly cargoes use this route, hidden from the world's satellites and radar networks. According to reports from Western intelligence sources, all types of military vessels less than 50 meters wide, including nuclear-capable submarines belonging to Russia's Northern Fleet, use this inland waterway as a ghost passage to completely avoid the dangerous waters controlled by NATO, which are covered by Norwegian and British radar and sonar networks. In short, this canal is a strategic point that allows Russia to quietly reposition its northern nuclear strike force, hiding it from the rest of the world. Lake Onega is the most critical junction of this channel, the widest, slowest to pass through, and therefore the most vulnerable point. And Ukraine has, with surgical precision, plunged its dagger precisely into this point, the soft underbelly of the Russian bear. The shockwaves created by the explosion on Lake Onega not only shattered the steel hull of the Grad ship like a tin can, they also destroyed a centuries-old legend that formed the basis of Russian military thinking: the narrative of strategic depth. This narrative has always been the Kremlin's greatest assurance, its last refuge, from Tsarist Russia to the Soviet Union and Putin's Russia. The idea was extremely simple. Russia is so vast, so enormous, that no enemy army can reach its heart, Moscow, without being logistically exhausted or defeated by the merciless Russian winter. General Winter. Napoleon's invincible Grande Armée had melted away before the ashes of Moscow. Hitler's unstoppable panzer divisions had frozen in the ruins of Stalingrad and been buried in history. This vast geography had always been Russia's greatest armor. While war was always fought there, beyond the borders, in Poland, Afghanistan, Syria, the homeland remained here, safe, untouchable, and sacred. The bombing of the Crimean Bridge was the first deep crack in the armor of this doctrine. The drones that fell on buildings in Moscow deepened this crack like cancer. However, the destruction of a cruise missile ship in Lake Onega, right next door to St. Petersburg, is the final, rusty, and heaviest nail in the coffin of this doctrine. This attack undeniably proved that modern long-range precision weapons, AI-assisted targeting, and daring special operations render geography completely meaningless. There is no longer such a thing as a front line. The front has now become a fluid, invisible network that stretches from the Ukrainian trenches to Russia's northernmost nuclear bases, the Trans-Siberian railways in Siberia, and Putin's most secure inner lakes, vulnerable to attack from anywhere at any time. Strategic depth is no longer armor. It is an impossible-to-defend, vast area of vulnerability stretching thousands of kilometers. Russia's greatest advantage has become its greatest curse. Immediately following the collapse of this military doctrine, a far more dangerous, far more contagious second wave effect begins to spread like a virus. Psychological collapse. The real target of this attack is not the metal hull of the Grad ship, but the illusion of security in the minds of the Russian elite and the people. This is a new and much more ruthless chapter in psychological warfare. Until now, especially for decision-makers, oligarchs, and wealthy elites in Moscow and St. Petersburg, the war was a distant problem experienced by others in Donbass or Zaporizhia, watched on state television screens. As long as their luxurious lives, yachts on the Neva River, Western-style cafes, and seemingly unshakable stable order continued, they couldn't care less about what the Kremlin was doing in Ukraine, or how many people were dying. The Onega Lake attack burst this comfortable, arrogant bubble like a sharp needle. Look at the map again. Onega is practically the backyard of St. Petersburg, Russia's cultural and economic second capital, the city where Putin and today's ruling class have their roots. These elites must now face the reality that the region where their summer dachas are located, where they sail with their children, where they thought they had bought peace with money stolen from the West, has now become a war zone. The war is no longer on television, because the war has come knocking on their own doors. This is the moment when the illusion that stability and security can be bought with money ends. This is the moment when the implicit social contract Putin offered them, "Remain loyal to me, and I will protect you and your wealth," is torn up. Panic begins to spread like a whispering fire on encrypted phone lines and private telegram groups. If we are not safe there, we are not safe anywhere. And this panic pushes the Kremlin into an insoluble dilemma, a slow but certain strategic suffocation. Putin and his generals, now sweating, at the head of their enormous maps, face an impossible choice. Will they use their advanced S-400 air defense systems, already critically depleted in number, and their most capable units to hold together the collapsing front lines, where hundreds of soldiers die every day? Or will they withdraw these priceless assets from the front and deploy them to protect the vast interior geography stretching thousands of kilometers? Strategic waterways, nuclear facilities, military bases, railway junctions, and industrial centers. This is a game where both options lead to disaster. If they weaken the front, they will pave the way for Ukraine's major military breakthrough, which has been meticulously planned for months, and risk total collapse. If they leave their interior lines unprotected, they allow daring attacks like the one on Lake Onega to continue and escalate, logistics lines to be completely paralyzed, and the chaos created by the war to become palpable in every city and every street in Russia. This is a slow, painful, and agonizing process of suffocation, crushing the Russian war machine under its own immense weight. With a single, precise, ingenious strike, Ukraine has trapped the Russian general staff in a cycle of chaos and decision paralysis on its own maps. The Kremlin is now in a state of complete panic, because it now knows that whatever move it makes, it will face a strategic checkmate at the end of the game. Thank you for choosing us.